China and Russia, two nations close to each other, both authoritarian, but very different when it comes to the way they run their societies. Let's explore this relationship. Both of the countries, China and Russia, saw the meltdown of their previous regimes back in 1970s and 80s and early 90s. With China, after Mao, started a very new era to rebuild the China as a society. Then came Deng Xiaoping, hugely practical but ideological guy at the same time, who wanted to build a market economy for China. So with Deng Xiaoping, China started to rise from its very local and regional mold to be the global star. And we saw already by the end of the 1990s that China started to have a real impact on the global market and global economy. And then came Xi Jinping, who about 10-12 years ago started to drive China to a much more authoritarian, much more also repressive way of building it, a new society which uses the latest of the technology. At the same time, if we think about where China began its path towards market economy, it first basically competed with the low prices. Maybe not so great quality, low prices was the key how they were able to access the global markets. And Chinese became very good also in being the copycats of the world, the fastly copying everything that they saw around. But that's not anymore the case only. China has also developed its own technology, its top technology, and today it's one of the foremost technology developers in the whole world, whatever technology we're talking about, from energy to artificial intelligence, machine learning, and everything between. So China became very curious building this technological capacity. And today we have the China that has what they call Silk Road strategy. Silk Road strategy has actually evolved into digital Silk Road strategy that brings China much more power, much more leverage to deal with the world and to have a power in the world. Now, Russia had a very different path. Russia was, of course, back in the 1980s, still a Soviet Union that then collapsed because it couldn't compete with the West. Boris Yeltsin in the 1990s started to build the market economy, but it was a very chaotic process until Vladimir Putin came and started to reign the state. He put some order there, which people enjoyed very much about. And then later on came the idea that Russia should reverse the track of the history and it should be built back into this state where actually Soviet Union were at the time, which means that you are the superpower, one of the superpowers of the world. So here we have these two nations, both big, and of course in terms of the population, China is a hugely bigger. And they share the border. The border is 4,300 kilometers long. Here in Finland, we share a border with Russia, which is only 1,300 kilometers. So it's very, very long border that these two countries share. So today, we have these two states, Russia and China, that historically are now pretty close, probably closer than they have been in the last 50, even 100 years. They don't form any formal alliance, but they are allies. After the crisis in Ukraine, after the whole crisis emanated, China hasn't condemned this attack, but also China has said that let's try to restrain the actions in the both sides, tries to be a little bit diplomatic. Now, we know that there is all kinds of a collaboration also on the military side between these two countries. And we know also that Russia is using a lot of Chinese technology. Huawei is the largest network telecom provider in Russia. With Huawei, it was particularly important that they made signs also for the West that they're not going to expand their business while the war is going on, because they were really fearing that Huawei would be put into the list of those that are sanctioned by US. They remained cautious in their actions and activities. But it seems like China is almost like seeing this as an opportunity to exert its power in Russia and play more forcefully this type of the big brother role that it has had already for some time. Because for the Russia, it is very clear that they need China's support. Unlike China, Russia does not produce a lot of the high-tech, doesn't produce chips, and many other things that are today needed in the military, but also in just the normal markets. And that's why it's very important that there is this rather close relationship with China. And China, on the other hand, wants to expand its power, its control. And Russia is hugely important for a couple of reasons. Geopolitics. Russia occupied a huge land area of this world, particularly in the north and in the east. And with a good relationship, China has this type of access into that part of the world. But also, China has already for a long time been interested, and the trade has been there for natural resources of different kinds, minerals, steel, so forth. So there is a lot of reason why they should be found on the same table, so to say. And increasingly also the political regime of the both countries looks pretty much similar. The leaders of the country keep a tight control what's going on in the country, no free expression, and a lot of control of different kinds. And China, of course, has developed this type of the technology for a long time, kind of an alternative to that type of the technology that is built in the West, basically mainly in the US. So, for Russia, China is a hugely important technology provider, and simply having an ally in this situation, in particular when the war that they have ignited in the immediate environment, it is really, really crucial that they have China as their ally. China, on the other hand, also needs Russia, apart from the raw materials also. Energy is important, fossil fuels, oil, so forth. But also that it is important for the China to have a neighbor that somehow understands the way the other one is thinking, even if their strategies, as I said, are hugely different. So where China wants to conquer the world by using digital networks, technologies, building standards, building control, investing huge amount of money all around the world to gain control over those economies and people. Russia wants to build a kind of an empire that have a strong say in the world and that can defend itself. And with these two quite different agendas and missions, they still find a lot of things that are in common. Of course, for the future, we don't know exactly, are they going to continue the same way? You might think that the revolution in China, or that something else kind of a dramatic happens in China, it's hardly imaginable. But it can still happen. The same goes with Russia. Russia now and what it can be in a couple of years can be quite different. There can be another regime coming that is much more Western leading, find the solace from the interaction between the Europe and even the US. Hard to think at the moment, but that might come as well. At least we need to keep that as one of the scenarios. So whatever the future will bring, it's not for certain that there will be those type of the close friends as they seem to be now. Something might come and change this trajectory. But for the time being, it looks that they are gaining from each other's company in the various ways. Even if what I observe is that the China is continuing to get a kind of an upper hand in their relationship. Summarizing, China and Russia share the same mission in the world, which is to curb the Western dominance in the world and be sort of alternative to that. But the way they do that, the way they do their own agendas are very, very different. The way they run their societies, the way they see how they should develop their technologies, their economies, again, widely different. That's why I don't think that their close relationship will be very long. They are too different to that. But for the time being, they are pretty close. Even with the Ukrainian situation, it might be that the China will have to start thinking differently about how it's going to deal with Russia. If Russia is going to continue on the path which is to cut all the relationship with the West. Because here comes the crucial difference. China cannot afford to cut the relationship with the Western economies. Its own welfare, its own economy, its own society is much too dependent of the flows of money, the flows of products and services, and the export between the China and the West. So China continues to be tight-roping. It has to remain with the relationship with the West. It cannot divert from that path. Russia, on the other hand, has done a very different kind of a decision. It's going to be very interesting to see what comes out of this Sino-Russian relationship in the future. But it's very clear at this point that it has a lot of importance, the way world will develop into the future. So, subscribe to my channel, share this with your friends, and see my related videos. And if you have your idea what this China-Russia relationship will be, please come back and tell to me.